What seemed like a sweet 1902 mum and son photo turned ominous when they saw the shadow. Photography curator Emma Richardson was cataloguing donations at the Liverpool Maritime Museum when she discovered the photograph tucked inside an old shipping ledger. The sepia-toned image, dated 1902, showed what appeared to be a tender moment between a young mother and her son in a Victorian parlour. The woman, elegantly dressed in a high-necked lace blouse and long dark skirt, sat in an ornate wooden chair with her arm lovingly wrapped around a boy of perhaps 8 years old. The child wore a sailor suit typical of the Edwardian era, complete with knee-length shorts and white stockings. Both subjects smiled warmly at the camera, creating an image of domestic bliss. The photograph's composition was expertly crafted, with natural light streaming through tall windows, creating beautiful contrasts across the scene. The parlour's Victorian furnishings, heavy curtains, ornate wallpaper, and carved furniture, spoke of comfortable middle-class prosperity. But as Emma held the photograph closer to examine the photographic technique, something caught her eye that made her breath catch. Behind the mother and son, cast across the parlour wall, was a shadow that seemed impossible given the positioning of the subjects. The shadow appeared to show a third figure, someone standing directly behind the chair, though no such person was visible in the photograph itself. Emma's trained eye told her this wasn't a double exposure or photographic error. The shadow was too distinct, too deliberately positioned to be accidental. Emma brought the photograph to her colleague, Dr. Michael Foster, a photographic historian specializing in early 20th century techniques. His laboratory in the museum's basement was equipped with high-resolution scanners and digital enhancement tools, perfect for analyzing historical images. Under magnification, the anomaly became even more disturbing. The shadow on the wall clearly depicted the silhouette of a tall figure wearing what appeared to be a top hat, standing directly behind the seated mother. The figure's arms seemed to be reaching forward, as if placing hands on the woman's shoulders, yet there was absolutely no one visible in that position. "This is photographically impossible," Michael muttered, adjusting his equipment. "Shadows require objects to cast them. The lighting in this room comes from the windows on the left. Any shadow cast behind the chair should be visible in the photograph itself." Emma studied the mother's expression more carefully. While her smile appeared genuine, there was something forced about it, a tension around her eyes that suggested discomfort. The boy's smile, too, seemed strained now that she looked closer. His small hand gripped his mother's arm tightly, knuckles white with apparent anxiety. Most unsettling was the realization that both subjects were looking directly at the camera, but their bodies were positioned as if accommodating someone standing behind them. The mother's shoulders were pushed slightly forward, and the boy leaned away from the chair's back, exactly as they would if someone were indeed standing there. The shadow told a story the photograph was hiding. The photograph had been found among papers donated by the Henderson family, whose patriarch had been a shipping clerk at Liverpool docks. Emma contacted Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, the elderly woman who had made the donation, hoping to learn more about the image's origins. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s, met Emma at her small flat in Birkenhead. Surrounded by maritime memorabilia and family photographs, she examined the 1902 image with growing recognition and discomfort. "Oh my," she whispered, her weathered hands trembling slightly. "I haven't seen this photograph in decades. This is my great-grandmother, Agnes Morrison, and her son, Thomas. They lived on Rodney Street in 1902, quite fashionable at the time." Mrs. Henderson's expression darkened as she continued studying the image. The family never spoke much about Agnes. She died quite young in 1903, under circumstances that were, well, never properly explained. Thomas was sent to live with relatives in Wales immediately afterward. Emma pointed to the mysterious shadow. "Do you know anything about this figure behind them?" Mrs. Henderson's face went pale. Family stories always mentioned that Agnes claimed someone was following her, watching her. She told people there was a man who would stand behind her, but no one else could see him. Everyone thought she was becoming mentally unstable from the stress of raising Thomas alone after her husband died at sea. The old woman paused, clearly uncomfortable. But the servants at the house on Rodney Street used to whisper that they felt a presence too, cold spots, the sensation of being watched. They said Agnes would sometimes speak to empty corners of rooms, as if someone were standing there. Emma's research into Agnes Morrison's life revealed a story of tragedy and isolation. Agnes had married merchant sailor Captain William Morrison in 1893, but he had been lost at sea in 1901 when his ship went down in a North Atlantic storm. Left widowed with young Thomas, Agnes had struggled to maintain their respectable lifestyle on Rodney Street. Neighbors' accounts from 1902, found in police records, painted a picture of a woman slowly losing her grip on reality. Multiple complaints had been filed about Agnes talking loudly to herself at all hours, often seeming to argue with an invisible presence. The local constable's notes described visits to the Morrison household, where Agnes insisted someone was in the house with her and Thomas, though searches revealed no intruder. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, the family physician, had documented Agnes's deteriorating mental state in his patient records, preserved at the Liverpool Medical Society archives. His notes from late 1902 described a woman convinced she was being stalked by her dead husband's ghost, who she claimed stood behind her constantly, watching and judging her parenting. Patient exhibits classic symptoms of bereavement-induced psychosis, Dr. Blackwood had written. She reports visual and tactile hallucinations of her deceased husband's presence. Most concerning is her belief that he disapproves of how she is raising their son and intends to take the boy with him to the sea. The doctor's final note, dated just weeks before Agnes's death, was chilling. Patient's condition has worsened dramatically. She now claims her husband appears in photographs and mirrors, though no one else can see him. Have recommended immediate psychiatric evaluation. Emma traced the photograph to Pemberton and Sons, a prominent photography studio that had operated on Bold Street in Liverpool from 1885 to 1920. The studio's business records donated to the city archives included detailed appointment books and client notes that provided crucial insight into the mysterious photograph. The entry for November 15, 1902, recorded an appointment for Mrs. A. Morrison and Son, formal portrait sitting. But handwritten notes in the margin told a more disturbing story. Client appeared agitated throughout session, repeatedly asked photographer to wait for William to position himself before taking exposure, kept adjusting position as if accommodating invisible third party, required multiple attempts due to client's insistence that William was not properly included in frame. James Pemberton Jr., who had taken over the studio from his father, had written a more detailed account in his private journal. Most unusual sitting today. Mrs. Morrison seemed convinced her deceased husband was present during the photography session. She positioned herself and the boy as if someone was standing behind them, even asking me to ensure adequate space in the composition for this invisible figure. The woman's grief has clearly affected her mental faculties, but the boy seemed to sense something as well. He kept glancing nervously behind the chair. Most intriguingly, Pemberton had noted technical anomalies during the development process. Strange shadows appeared in the negative that were not visible during the actual sitting. The chemical development process seems to have captured something that the human eye could not perceive. Most peculiar phenomenon I've encountered in 20 years of photography. The studio had kept the original glass plate negative, which Emma was able to examine under modern laboratory conditions. Dr. Rebecca Walsh, a forensic photography expert from Manchester University, analyzed the original 1902 glass plate negative using advanced spectral analysis techniques. Her findings challenged conventional understanding of both photographic science and the Morrison family tragedy. The shadow on the negative shows characteristics that are scientifically impossible, Dr. Walsh explained in her laboratory. The silver halide crystals in the photographic emulsion have been exposed in a pattern that suggests interaction with electromagnetic radiation of a frequency not visible to the human eye. It's as if something was present that could affect the chemical process without being visually apparent. The spectral analysis revealed that the shadow contained details invisible to the naked eye. Enhanced digital processing showed facial features in the silhouette. A bearded man wearing period clothing consistent with a merchant sailor's attire. The figure's posture suggested protective positioning, hands placed on Agnes's shoulders in a gesture that seemed both comforting and possessive. What's most disturbing, Dr. Walsh continued, is that the electromagnetic signature suggests this wasn't a one-time phenomenon. Chemical analysis of the plate shows repeated exposure to the same unusual energy pattern, as if multiple attempts were made to photograph this invisible presence. Emma shared Dr. Blackwood's medical notes with Dr. Walsh, who found the combination of evidence compelling. If we accept that grief-induced psychological trauma can sometimes heighten sensitivity to electromagnetic phenomena, Agnes Morrison might have been genuinely experiencing something others couldn't perceive. The photographic plate, being a chemical recording device rather than human perception, could have captured evidence of this presence. The scientific analysis suggested that the sweet mother and son photograph had documented something far more complex than family grief. Emma's investigation led her to Wales, where she tracked down surviving relatives of Thomas Morrison. His great-nephew, David Morrison, lived in a coastal village near Anglesey and possessed family documents that had been carefully guarded for over a century. David, a retired schoolteacher in his 70s, welcomed Emma into his cottage overlooking the Irish Sea. "Thomas lived with our family until he was 18, David explained, pulling out a wooden box filled with letters and photographs. He rarely spoke about his mother, or those final months in Liverpool, but he did leave these behind when he emigrated to Canada in 1912. Among Thomas's belongings was a child's diary, written in careful pencil script. The entries from late 1902 painted a picture of genuine supernatural encounters that corroborated his mother's claims. "Papa comes to visit us every evening now," 8-year-old Thomas had written. "He stands behind Mama's chair and tries to touch her, but his hands pass through. He looks sad and keeps pointing toward the window, toward the ships in the harbor." Another entry was more disturbing. "Papa told me in my dreams that Mama is sick, and he needs to take care of both of us now. He says the water is calling us home, where our family can be together again. Mama cries when she sees him, but I think she wants to go with him." The final entry, dated just days before Agnes's death, was written in a shaky child's hand. "Papa is getting stronger. Now other people can almost see him too. The photograph man saw his shadow. Papa says soon everyone will understand that we belong with him in the deep water where sailors go to rest." Thomas had witnessed everything his mother experienced, confirming that their supernatural encounters were shared reality, not individual delusion. Emma discovered the truth about Agnes Morrison's death in the coroner's records and newspaper archives from January 1903. The Liverpool Echo's report painted a picture of tragedy that the family had spent decades trying to forget. On the night of January 3, 1903, neighbors reported hearing Agnes talking animatedly in her parlor well past midnight, though no visitors had been seen entering the house. Mrs. Fairfax from next door later told police she had heard Agnes saying, "Yes, William, I understand. Thomas and I will come with you now." The constable's report described finding the front door standing wide open in the early morning, with evidence that Agnes and Thomas had walked out into the frigid winter night wearing only their nightclothes. Their footprints in the snow led directly to the River Mersey, where the trail disappeared at the water's edge. Agnes's body was found 3 days later, washed up near the Albert Dock. The coroner ruled her death a suicide by drowning, noting that she had likely walked deliberately into the river during a psychotic episode. But Thomas's body was never recovered, leading to speculation that he had either drowned and been swept out to sea, or had somehow survived and fled. The most chilling detail came from Thomas's Welsh relatives. He had arrived at their doorstep the morning after his mother's death, soaking wet and speaking incoherently about Papa taking Mama home to the deep. He claimed to have walked across the water guided by his father's spirit, though the journey from Liverpool to Wales would have been impossible for a child to make alone. The family had hidden this supernatural element of the story, preferring to let people believe Thomas had been staying with relatives when his mother died. Emma's final breakthrough came through maritime records at the National Archives. Captain William Morrison's ship, the SS Britannica, had indeed been lost in the North Atlantic in November 1901, but the circumstances of the disaster revealed a connection to his family's tragic fate. The ship had gone down during a severe storm while carrying cargo from Liverpool to New York. Survivor accounts described Captain Morrison's final moments. He had refused to abandon his vessel, staying behind to ensure his crew's escape. His last words, recorded by the first mate who survived, were, "Tell Agnes and Thomas I'll find my way home to them. Love stronger than the sea will bring me back." Maritime folklore among Liverpool sailors included numerous reports of Captain Morrison's ghost being sighted on the docks and around the Mersey throughout 1902. Dock workers reported seeing a figure in captain's uniform walking the waterfront at night, always moving toward Rodney Street where his family lived. The most significant discovery was a letter from the shipping company to Agnes, delivered just days before the family photograph was taken in November 1902. The letter informed her that William's body had finally been recovered and would be returned to Liverpool for burial. The timing suggested that the photographic session had been planned as a memorial portrait, with Agnes believing her husband's spirit would somehow participate. The shadow in the photograph, Emma realized, had captured the moment of Captain Morrison's spiritual reunion with his family, a presence strong enough to affect the photographic chemicals, even though invisible to human perception. The sweet mother and son portrait had documented their final moments together before William's spirit led them both home to the eternal sea. 6 months after her discovery, Emma stood before an audience at the Liverpool Maritime Museum, presenting the complete Morrison family story. The 1902 photograph, now properly contextualized, served as evidence of love transcending death and the power of grief to open doorways between worlds. David Morrison had traveled from Wales for the presentation, bringing additional family artifacts that completed the tragic tale. Thomas lived to be 93, he revealed to the gathered crowd. He always insisted that his father had saved him that night, guiding him safely away from the water while taking his mother home. He never married, never had children, said his heart belonged to the sea where his parents waited. Dr. Walsh presented her scientific findings, suggesting that intense emotional trauma could indeed create electromagnetic phenomena detectable by early photographic equipment. The Morrison case represents one of the best documented examples of spirit photography from the Edwardian era. Not a deliberate fake, but a genuine recording of unexplained energy patterns. The museum installed a permanent exhibit about the Morrison family, including the mysterious photograph and Thomas's diary. The shadow that had once seemed ominous was now understood as evidence of a father's love reaching across death to comfort his grieving family. Emma reflected on how the investigation had transformed her understanding of both photography and human connection. What had appeared to be a sweet family portrait had revealed itself as documentation of the most profound love story, a tale of devotion so strong that death itself could not sever the bonds between husband, wife, and child. The shadow in the photograph was not ominous at all. It was proof that love truly is eternal, sometimes strong enough to cast shadows across time itself.